My wife didn't book a room for me at the luxury resort. Her friends giggled like schoolgirls when I asked about my key at reception. Only elites get suites, Danny, chirped Patricia, my wife Sarah's college roommate, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. Maybe you can find a nice little corner somewhere. I just nodded, walked away, and took the key for what was essentially a glorified broom closet from the sympathetic desk clerk. 22 years of marriage, and this is what it had come to. Sarah stood there in her designer sundress, perfectly manicured nails wrapped around a champagne flute, not saying a word in my defense. The Ocean View Resort and Spa was the kind of place that screamed money louder than a fire alarm. All glass and chrome, with staff who moved like they were performing ballet, and guests who acted like they owned the world. Sarah fit right in. Me? I stuck out like a wrench in a jewelry box. Don't take it personally, Danny, Sarah said later, cornering me by the infinity pool where I was nursing a beer that cost more than my lunch. It's just that this weekend is important for my career. These people are potential clients. Like Marcus Blackwell, the real estate developer who'd been circling my wife like a shark for months. The guy was built like a linebacker who'd discovered protein shakes and personal trainers, designer everything, from his Italian shoes to his capped teeth. The kind of man who used words like synergy and leverage in casual conversation. Your career, I repeated, watching Marcus emerge from the pool, water cascading off his gym-sculpted chest. Is that what we're calling it now? Sarah's eyes flashed dangerously. What's that supposed to mean? Before I could answer, chaos erupted from the penthouse suite next door. Loud Russian voices, breaking glass, and what sounded like furniture being thrown around. The other guests looked uncomfortable, whispering among themselves about those people and their lack of class. Someone should call security, Patricia announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. The noise got worse. A woman screamed. Then I heard what sounded like someone getting hurt, really hurt. I stood up, but Sarah grabbed my arm. Danny, don't! It's not our problem. Someone's in trouble up there. The staff will handle it. Sit down. You're embarrassing me. That's when a man came crashing through the glass doors of the penthouse balcony above us, tumbling into the pool with a tremendous splash. Blood clouded the water around his head. Everyone screamed and scattered except me. I dove in without thinking, hauling the guy to the shallow end. He was conscious but dazed, speaking rapid Russian. Through the broken balcony doors above, I could see 3 men ransacking the suite, clearly looking for something. Call 911, I shouted to the frozen crowd. Nobody moved. They just stood there like mannequins in expensive swimwear. The 3 Russians spotted me in the pool and started heading for the stairs. They were big, drunk, and angry. The kind of angry that comes from not finding what you're looking for. The first one reached poolside, just as I was climbing out. He swung a vodka bottle at my head. I ducked, grabbed his wrist, and used his momentum to send him face first into the concrete. The bottle shattered, cutting his palm. The second Russian was smarter, coming at me low, but 20 years of working on cars had given me quick hands and a solid center of gravity. I sidestepped, grabbed the back of his neck, and introduced his face to my knee. Not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to change his mind about fighting. The third guy pulled a knife, a big, nasty-looking thing that caught the afternoon sun. The crowd gasped. Sarah screamed my name, but not in the way that suggested she was worried about me. More like she was worried about the scene I was making. Easy there, comrade, I said, circling him slowly. This doesn't have to get uglier than it already is. He lunged. I grabbed a pool chair, using it to block the knife and trap his arm. A quick twist, and the blade clattered across the deck. He tried to punch me, but I was already inside his reach. I grabbed his shirt and belt and helped him find his way into the pool, right next to his bleeding friend. The whole thing took maybe 90 seconds. When it was over, 3 Russians were either unconscious, bleeding, or treading water, and I was standing there in my soaked cargo shorts and work boots, breathing hard but uninjured. The crowd stared at me like I'd just performed magic. Security finally showed up, along with the police and paramedics. The injured man from the balcony had a concussion but would live. The 3 attackers were arrested for assault and robbery. Impressive work, said Detective Rodriguez, taking my statement. Military background? Nope. Just grew up in Detroit. Sarah didn't speak to me for the rest of the evening. Neither did her friends. They huddled together at dinner, shooting glances my way like I was some kind of dangerous animal they'd accidentally brought to the petting zoo. That night, alone in my broom closet, I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I found Sarah and her crew at the resort's overpriced breakfast buffet, picking at fruit salads and discussing their yoga plans. They were dressed in matching athleisure outfits that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. "Ladies," I said, approaching their table with an envelope in my hand. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" Patricia looked up with barely concealed disgust. "Danny, shouldn't you be, I don't know, fixing something?" "Actually, I am fixing something." I placed the envelope in front of Sarah. "Divorce papers, already filed with the county clerk back home. You've been served." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ocean waves 3 floors below. Sarah's face went through several color changes before settling on an interesting shade of purple. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "Dead serious. 22 years, Sarah. 22 years of you being ashamed of what I do, where I come from, who I am. Last night was the final straw." "Last night? You mean when you assaulted those poor tourists?" I laughed, actually laughed. "Poor tourists. They threw a man off a balcony. I stopped him from maybe killing him. And your first concern was that I was embarrassing you." Marcus appeared from nowhere, sliding into the seat next to Sarah like he belonged there. "Is there a problem here?" "No, no problem at all, Marcus." I smiled at him, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Just delivering some paperwork. Sarah's a free woman now. Well, she will be in 6 months when the divorce is final." "Danny, please," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can what? Pretend you haven't been screwing the real estate prince here for the past 6 months?" The color drained from her face. Marcus started to stand up, probably to defend Sarah's honor or some such nonsense. But I held up a hand. "Sit down, Marcus. We're all adults here." "Well, most of us are." "How did you—" Sarah began. "The late-night client meetings, the new lingerie that never made an appearance in our bedroom, the way you suddenly started caring about your appearance again, after 15 years of sweatpants and ponytails. Oh, and the fact that you moan his name in your sleep." Patricia gasped. The other women looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I'm not angry about the affair," I continued, which was mostly true. "I'm angry about the disrespect. The way you've treated me like some kind of embarrassing relative you can't quite get rid of. The way you've let your friends talk about me like I'm not even human." I pulled out my phone and played a recording from the night before. Patricia's voice came through crystal clear. "I don't know what Sarah sees in that grease monkey. He's like a trained ape, useful for opening jars and scaring away burglars, but hardly husband material." Patricia turned the same shade of purple Sarah had been moments earlier. "You recorded us." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "I recorded a conversation that took place in a public area where I had every right to be. Nothing illegal about it. Unlike adultery, which is still grounds for divorce in our state, and which can affect the division of assets." Marcus finally found his voice. "Now listen here." "No, you listen." I leaned forward, keeping my voice conversational, but letting him see something in my eyes that made him shrink back. "You want her? You can have her, but understand this. I built the life she's about to lose half of. The house, the cars, the savings account, the retirement fund. 22 years of my sweat and blood. She gets half, but that still leaves her with a lot less than she's used to." I stood up, straightening my shirt. "I've got a flight to catch. Sarah, your lawyer can contact my lawyer. All the information is in the envelope. Ladies, it's been educational." I walked away without looking back, but I could hear the explosion of voices behind me. Sarah crying, Patricia screeching about lawsuits, Marcus trying to calm everyone down, the sound of my old life imploding. At the airport bar, nursing a whiskey while waiting for my flight, my phone buzzed with a text from my old friend Jake Morrison. "Heard through the grapevine you might need some help with what comes next. They're already plotting. Call me when you land." Jake was an ex-cop who'd retired early after taking a bullet in the line of duty. Now he ran a boxing gym and did occasional private security work. More importantly, he was one of the few people who'd never treated me like I was beneath them. I finished my whiskey and smiled. Sarah thought she knew who she was dealing with. She thought I was just some dumb mechanic who'd roll over and take whatever scraps she threw my way. She was about to learn otherwise. The house looked different when I pulled into the driveway. Smaller somehow, like it had shrunk in my absence. Or maybe it was just that I was seeing it clearly for the first time in years. The perfect suburban facade, with its manicured lawn and matching shutters. Sarah's dream house, paid for with my labor. I'd barely gotten my bag out of the truck when Mrs. Henderson from next door appeared at her fence. She was in her 70s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing in our quiet neighborhood. Danny, you're back early. Where's Sarah? Still on vacation, I said, which was technically true. I had some business to take care of. Oh. She looked disappointed. Mrs. Henderson lived for neighborhood gossip, and my early return alone was clearly intriguing. Well, I should mention that Sarah's friend has been by a few times while you were gone. The tall one with the fancy car, Marcus, of course. Thanks for keeping an eye on things, Mrs. H. That's what neighbors are for, dear. Inside, the house felt like a museum. Everything perfectly arranged, nothing out of place. Sarah had always been obsessive about cleanliness and order. No family photos on the mantel anymore, I noticed. Those had disappeared gradually over the years, replaced by abstract art and decorative objects that looked expensive but meant nothing. I was unpacking when my daughter Emma called. She was 19, a sophomore at State, studying pre-law just like her mother. We'd been close once, but Sarah had been working on that relationship for years. Subtle comments about my lack of education, my crude sense of humor, my embarrassing profession. Dad, Mom called. She says you filed for divorce. I did. Why? What happened? I sat down on the bed, suddenly exhausted. Your mother and I want different things, Em. We've wanted different things for a long time now. But you can work it out, right? People go through rough patches. That's normal. Some things can't be worked out, sweetheart. Mom says you're having some kind of midlife crisis. She says you attacked some tourists at the resort. There it was, Sarah's version of events, carefully crafted to make me look unstable. Is that what she told you? She's really upset, Dad. She loves you. I'm sure she does, in her way. I didn't have the heart to tell Emma about Marcus, about the affair, about the years of subtle humiliation. She'd figure it out eventually. Listen, whatever happens between your mother and me, it doesn't change how I feel about you. You know that, right? I know. Her voice was small, uncertain. I don't understand why everything has to change. After we hung up, I sat in the silence for a long time. Emma was right. Everything was about to change. But change wasn't always bad. Sometimes it was necessary. Jake called an hour later. How are you holding up? Been better. What did you mean about them plotting? Got a buddy who works security at that resort. He says your wife and her boyfriend spent yesterday making phone calls. Lots of phone calls. To lawyers, to your mutual friends, to your daughter. They're building a narrative, Danny, making you out to be unstable, violent, maybe dangerous. I wasn't surprised. Sarah was a lawyer. She knew how these things worked. Any idea what their end game is? Best guess? They want you to look like the bad guy in the divorce. Violent husband, midlife crisis, attacked innocent tourists. If they can make that stick, Sarah gets more than half in the settlement. Maybe she gets everything. Over my dead body. Jake chuckled. That's the spirit. You need help? Probably. But nothing illegal, Jake. I'm not going to prison for these people. Wouldn't dream of it. I'm thinking more along the lines of evening the playing field. You free tomorrow night? Why? Because your wife and her boyfriend are going to be at Meridian, that new upscale bar downtown, celebrating, from what I hear. Might be educational to see what they're celebrating. I knew Meridian. It was the kind of place Sarah had always wanted to go but claimed we couldn't afford. Dark wood, expensive whiskey, clientele who wore suits that cost more than most people's cars. Not exactly my scene, but then again, I was learning that a lot of things weren't my scene anymore. I'll pick you up at 8, Jake said. And Danny, wear something nice. We're going to blend in. Uh-huh. After he hung up, I walked through the house, really looking at it for the first time in years. The kitchen where Sarah and I used to cook together, back when she still ate carbs. The living room, where we'd watched movies, before she decided my taste in entertainment was too lowbrow. The bedroom where we'd made love, before she started finding excuses to stay up late or go to bed early. 22 years of memories, and most of the good ones were from the first 10. When had we stopped being partners and become strangers sharing a mortgage? My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Danny, please call me. We need to talk about this rationally. I deleted it without responding. Rational. That was Sarah's favorite word. Everything had to be rational, logical, carefully considered. She'd rationalized her way out of loving me years ago. Now she wanted to rationalize her way out of the consequences. I poured myself a beer and sat on the back deck, looking out at the yard I'd spent countless weekends maintaining. The garden Sarah had insisted on but never helped with. The fence I'd built to keep the neighbor's dog out. The patio where we'd hosted barbecues for friends who'd gradually stopped inviting us to their parties. Tomorrow night, I'd get a look at what Sarah and Marcus were really up to. Tonight, I'd start planning my response. Because if they wanted to play games, I was about to show them how a Detroit boy played to win. Jake picked me up in his black Suburban at exactly 8 o'clock. He was wearing a charcoal suit that made him look more like a corporate executive than an ex-cop who ran a boxing gym. The bullet he'd taken in the shoulder had left him with a slight limp, but he was still an imposing figure at 6'3", with silver hair and intelligent gray eyes. "You clean up nice," he said as I climbed into the passenger seat. I'd borrowed a suit from my brother-in-law, navy blue and only slightly too big. With a decent tie and my good shoes, I looked almost respectable. Almost. Feel like I'm wearing a costume. Sometimes that's what it takes. You ready for this? Ready as I'll ever be. Meridian was exactly what I'd expected. Dim lighting, exposed brick walls, and a crowd that looked like they'd stepped out of a business magazine. The kind of place where a beer cost $15 and came in a glass with the brewery's logo etched into it. We found a table in the back corner with a good view of the bar. Jake ordered something called a Macallan 18, which apparently cost $40 a shot. I stuck with bourbon. "There," Jake said, nodding toward the entrance. Sarah walked in like she owned the place, which, knowing her, she probably thought she did. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, something that hugged her curves and probably cost more than my monthly salary. Her hair was different too, longer, styled in waves that framed her face. She looked beautiful, confident, and completely unlike the woman I'd been married to for 22 years. Marcus followed behind her, his hand possessively on the small of her back. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck, and he moved through the crowd like a shark through water, smooth, predatory, always looking for the next opportunity. They weren't alone. Patricia was there, along with 2 other women from Sarah's book club, and bringing up the rear was someone I didn't recognize. A thin man in his 50s, with expensive glasses, and the kind of pale complexion that came from spending all day in an office. "Who's the stranger?" I asked Jake. Jake had his phone out, taking discreet photos. "Give me a minute." He sent a quick text, then waited for the response. "Richard Steinberg, divorce attorney, specializes in high net worth cases, has a reputation for being aggressive. Great." Sarah wasn't just planning to divorce me. She was planning to destroy me. They took a table near the bar, and I could see Marcus ordering champagne. Expensive champagne, from the way the server's eyes lit up. They were definitely celebrating something. "Can you hear what they're saying?" I asked. Jake shook his head. "Too much background noise. But watch their body language." I did. Sarah was animated, gesturing with her hands in a way that suggested excitement. Patricia kept leaning in, whispering things that made the group laugh. Marcus looked smug, like a cat who'd caught a particularly fat mouse. And the lawyer, Steinberg, was taking notes on his phone. "They're planning something," I said. "Question is what?" We didn't have to wait long to find out. Sarah stood up, champagne glass in hand, and tapped it with her knife to get the group's attention. "I want to thank all of you for being here tonight," she said, her voice carrying just enough for us to hear. "This has been a difficult time. But with your support and Richard's expertise, I think we can all agree that the future looks bright." Patricia raised her glass. To Sarah, for finally having the courage to leave that Neanderthal. They all laughed and drank. I felt my jaw clench, but Jake put a warning hand on my arm. "Wait," he said quietly. "Let them talk." Steinberg cleared his throat. "The strategy we discussed should work perfectly. The incident at the resort gives us grounds to claim erratic and potentially violent behavior. Combined with the financial records Patricia obtained, we should be able to argue that Daniel has been hiding assets and poses a threat to Sarah's safety." My blood went cold. "Financial records? What financial records?" Jake was already on his phone, fingers flying over the keyboard. "Patricia works at First National, right? Same bank where you have your accounts?" "Yeah, but she's just a loan officer. She wouldn't have access to—" "She would if she was friends with someone in the right department, and if she was willing to bend some rules." I thought about all the times Patricia had been to our house, all the opportunities she'd had to see bank statements, tax returns, anything Sarah might have left lying around. Sarah was meticulous about filing, but she wasn't paranoid about security. Why would she be? Patricia was her best friend. "They're talking about the house," Jake said, listening intently. I strained to hear. Steinberg was explaining something about asset valuation and community property. Marcus was nodding along, occasionally adding comments about real estate markets and investment potential. The key, Steinberg was saying, is to establish that Daniel's behavior has become unpredictable and potentially dangerous. The assault charges. There are no assault charges, I said, louder than I'd intended. The conversation at their table stopped. Sarah turned in my direction, scanning the crowd. For a moment, our eyes met across the room. Her face went white, then red, then settled into an expression of cold fury. She said something to Marcus, who immediately stood up and started walking toward our table. He was a big man, used to intimidating people with his size and presence. But Jake stood up too, and suddenly Marcus didn't look quite so imposing. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, stopping a few feet away from our table. "I think you're in the wrong establishment. This is a private gathering." "Funny," Jake replied, his voice pleasant but his eyes hard. "I didn't see any private party signs. Did you, Danny?" "Nope, just two guys having a drink in a public bar." Marcus's face darkened. "Look, I don't know what your game is, but no game," I said, standing up slowly. "Just wanted to see what my wife was celebrating. Imagine my surprise to find out she's celebrating my destruction." "You're paranoid, Daniel. Sarah's just protecting herself from what? From the man who worked 2 jobs to put her through law school? From the guy who built the life she's now trying to steal?" People at nearby tables were starting to stare. Marcus glanced back at Sarah's table, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "This isn't the place for this conversation," he said. "You're right." I pulled out my wallet and dropped 2 20s on the table. "Jake, I think we've heard enough." As we walked toward the exit, I could feel Sarah's eyes burning into my back. I turned at the door and gave her a little wave. She looked like she wanted to throw something. In the parking lot, Jake was grinning. "That was educational. They're going to claim I assaulted those Russians and use it to paint me as violent and unstable. Patricia's been feeding them inside information about my finances, and they're planning to take everything. That's about the size of it. So what do we do?" Jake's grin widened. "We fight back. But first, we need to level the playing field. Meaning it's time to show them that you're not the only one who can play dirty. Judo had them Balton." 3 days later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, watching him read through the documents Jake had helped me gather. David Chen was nothing like Sarah's high-priced specialist. He was a small-town attorney who handled everything from divorces to real estate disputes. But he was honest, thorough, and he didn't charge $300 an hour. "This is good," David said, looking up from the papers. "Very good. Where did you get bank records showing Patricia's access to your accounts?" "A friend who knows people in the right places." Jake had called in a favor with someone at the bank's security department. Turned out Patricia had been accessing my account information for months, using her position to gather intelligence for Sarah. Is it enough? More than enough. She violated federal banking regulations and probably broke several state laws in the process. "But Danny, if we use this, it's going to get ugly fast." "It's already ugly. They want to paint me as a violent criminal and take everything I've worked for. I'm done playing defense." David nodded slowly. "What about your daughter? This kind of thing tends to get messy, and family members often get caught in the crossfire." That was the part that kept me awake at night. Emma was already struggling with the divorce, and what I was about to do would make things worse before they got better. But if I didn't fight back, Sarah would poison her against me anyway. "I'll deal with Emma when the time comes." "All right then. Let's go to war." The first shot was fired that afternoon. David filed a motion with the court, requesting an immediate restraining order against Patricia, citing illegal access to financial records and conspiracy to commit fraud. We also filed a complaint with the State Banking Commission and requested a full audit of my accounts. The second shot came 2 hours later, when Jake and I paid a visit to Marcus's real estate office. Blackwell Development occupied the top floor of a glass tower downtown, all modern furniture and abstract art. Marcus's secretary tried to stop us, but Jake had a way of moving that suggested resistance would be futile. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, looking up from his desk as we walked into his office. "This is highly irregular. I'm going to have to ask you to—" "Shut up and listen," I said, taking a seat in one of his expensive chairs. "We need to have a conversation about boundaries." Marcus reached for his phone, probably to call security, but Jake was already moving. He didn't touch Marcus, didn't threaten him, just positioned himself between Marcus and the door in a way that made it clear who was in control of the situation. I know about the bank records, I continued. I know about the strategy session at Meridian. I know about the plan to paint me as violent and unstable. And I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. I pulled out my phone and played a recording from the bar. Jake had better equipment than I'd given him credit for. Marcus's voice came through clearly. The assault charges should be enough to establish a pattern of violent behavior. Marcus went pale. You can't record private conversations without consent. Actually, I can. Illinois is a one-party consent state, and Jake here consented to the recording. Funny thing about lawyers, sometimes they forget the law applies to them too. What do you want? I want you to understand something, Marcus. I spent 20 years in Detroit before moving here. I learned how to handle bullies before I learned to tie my shoes. You think you can intimidate me with lawyers and money and social pressure? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I leaned forward, keeping my voice conversational. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop manipulating my wife. You're going to stop feeding her fantasies about taking everything I own. And you're going to find somewhere else to stick your dick, because if I catch you sniffing around my family again, I'm going to make your life very unpleasant. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining consequences. There's a difference. Marcus looked at Jake, who was studying the diplomas on the wall with professional interest. This is harassment. I could have you arrested. For what? Having a conversation. I haven't threatened you, haven't touched you, haven't done anything but explain how things are going to work from now on. I stood up, straightening my jacket. But since you mentioned arrest, you might want to talk to your lawyer about conspiracy charges. Turns out using illegally obtained financial information in a divorce proceeding is a felony. We left him sitting there, staring at his phone like it might explode. In the elevator, Jake was grinning again. Think that got through to him? We'll find out. But I'm betting he's on the phone with Sarah right now, telling her they need to change tactics. I was right. My phone started ringing before we reached the parking garage. Sarah's number flashed on the screen. Danny, we need to talk. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere? Where? The coffee shop on Maple Street. 1 hour. I looked at Jake, who nodded. I'll be there. Come alone, Danny, please. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a moment, then handed it to Jake. What do you think? I think she's scared. Question is whether she's scared enough to be reasonable, or scared enough to do something stupid. Only one way to find out. But as we drove toward the coffee shop, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah had one more card to play. And knowing my wife, it was going to be a doozy. The coffee shop on Maple Street was one of those aggressively quaint places, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Sarah was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a mug, like she was trying to draw warmth from it. She looked smaller somehow, less polished than she had at Meridian. Thank you for coming, she said, as I slid into the seat across from her. You said we needed to talk. Danny, this has gotten out of hand. The restraining order against Patricia, the banking investigation, whatever you said to Marcus. We need to find a way to resolve this like adults. Adults don't conspire to destroy each other, Sarah. She winced. I know how it looks, but you have to understand, I was scared. The way you acted at the resort, the violence, the anger, I didn't know what you might do. So you decided to strike first. I decided to protect myself. Her voice cracked slightly. Danny, I know we've had problems, but I never wanted it to come to this. I studied her face, looking for some sign of the woman I'd married. She was still beautiful, still capable of making my heart skip when she looked at me a certain way. But there was something else there now, something calculating and cold. What do you want, Sarah? I want us to end this marriage with some dignity intact. Split everything 50-50. No accusations, no drama. Just let each other go. And Marcus? She looked down at her coffee. Marcus is complicated. How complicated? Danny, please, can't we just... How long, Sarah? How long have you been sleeping with him? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, she looked up, and I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach drop. 2 years, she whispered. 2 years, not 6 months like I'd thought. 2 years of lies, of fake smiles, of her coming home to me after being with him. 2 years of me thinking we were just going through a rough patch while she was building a whole new life behind my back. 2 years, I repeated. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just did. And Patricia knew. Patricia introduced us. She thought Marcus would be good for my career. The pieces clicked into place. Patricia hadn't just been helping with the divorce strategy. She'd been orchestrating the affair from the beginning. My wife's best friend had pimped her out to a real estate developer, then helped cover it up. Jesus, Sarah, do you hear yourself? Patricia sold you to Marcus like a piece of property, and you went along with it. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you traded 22 years of marriage for a chance to sleep with a guy who owns half the city. Sarah's composure finally cracked. Tears started flowing, and for a moment she looked like the young woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. I was drowning, Danny. In this life, in this house, in this version of myself that I never wanted to be. You were happy with the way things were, but I wasn't. I needed more. So you cheated. So I found someone who saw me as more than just a mechanic's wife. The words hit like a physical blow. After everything we'd been through, everything we'd built together, that's how she saw herself, as a mechanic's wife? I put you through law school, Sarah. I worked double shifts so you could focus on your studies. I supported your career even when it meant we barely saw each other. How is that not seeing you as more than a wife? You supported the idea of my career, but you never really understood it. You never understood the world I was trying to enter, the people I needed to impress, the image I needed to project. So you projected an image that didn't include me. I projected an image that didn't include a husband who shows up to client events in work boots and gets into fights with tourists. There it was, the truth she'd been dancing around for years. I wasn't good enough for her new life. I was an embarrassment, a reminder of where she'd come from and what she was trying to escape. You know what the funny thing is? I said, standing up from the booth. I would have let you go. If you'd been honest with me 2 years ago, if you'd said you wanted something different, I would have stepped aside. But you didn't have the courage to be honest. You snuck around, you lied, you conspired with your friends to destroy me rather than just asking for what you wanted. Danny, wait. No, we're done here. You want 50-50? Fine. But you're going to get 50% of what's left after I'm done protecting myself from you and your friends. I walked out without looking back, but I could hear her crying behind me. Part of me wanted to turn around, to comfort her, to try one more time to find some way to salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. But that part of me was shrinking fast, being replaced by something harder and colder. Something that understood that sometimes the only way to win was to make sure the other side lost everything. Jake was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his Suburban. How'd it go? 2 years, Jake. She's been cheating for 2 years. Shit, I'm sorry, man. Don't be. I'm done being sorry. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Time to escalate. Who are you calling? Emma. It's time she knew the truth about her mother. Because if Sarah wanted to play for keeps, I was about to show her what that really meant.